Okay, welcome to our webinar today. Today's webinar, IT's Secret Weapon, the Virtual Directory, is being brought to you by Optimal IDM. And today our guest speaker is Michael Brengs. He has over 20 years of experience in the software industry and has been deploying identity management solutions since joining Open Network Technologies in 2000 and later with Obelix, which was acquired by Oracle. Mr. Brengs is a recognized identity management expert and has been a guest speaker at many industry events. He's currently Chief Revenue Officer and a managing partner with Optimal IDM. Mike, welcome.
Thanks, Matt. So today we're going to talk a little bit about virtual directory technology, and now it's kind of a little bit of a secret weapon. Well, not to those who are familiar with the technology. So we're going to dive right in. So a little bit about us first. We were founded in 2005. We're 100% organically grown. So we have no debt, no outside investment. We're completely organic growth. We've been profitable every year of existence. We have solutions deployed globally on 6 continents. If you look at the market endorsement, we've been in the Magic Quadrant for identity and access management for the last 3 years. Won several other awards as well. What I first wanted to start with was just a couple of things from Gartner. So this was actually their hype cycle. Now, this was back in 2012. They really haven't done as much research recently on virtual directories, but I was just talking to an analyst the other day, and they say it still comes up all the time where they recommend the technology. They just haven't done really any papers on it recently. But this is their hype cycle, which shows where virtual directories fit there. And obviously that's on the plateau of productivity, as they call it. And then in 2013, you can see it moved further up and to the right as well. And then another report that they did was a 6 quick wins in identity management. And actually 3 of them mentioned virtual directory technology. So very useful technology, as we'll see, and kind of go through different use cases, scenarios of where virtual directory makes sense. And so if you're not familiar with technology, hopefully you'll walk away seeing where a virtual directory can be used. So the first thing I like to start off with, if somebody's not familiar with what a virtual directory is give you a comparison to something that you are familiar with, which is proxy servers. We use proxy servers all the time, whether that's in HTTP proxies, and that's really, obviously there's a whole lot more to it, but at the basic level, that's what a virtual directory is. It's an LDAP proxy. It can provide a real-time view of multiple forests, multiple data stores, and it's important, just like other proxies, that it's not synchronizing the data, it's rather proxying it, right? So it's a real-time proxy down to that back-end system, returning the data to the application that made the call. And that's also important to know, which is virtual directories are all about applications. And we're going to see whether that's adding additional security and control, like you see there, has that bullet, or whether it's just making an application function because the application doesn't support multiple forests, multi-directories, or maybe other inefficiencies within the app, which we'll see in later slides. So give you a real-world scenario of how one of our customers is using the product, the state of Kansas. So not unsurprisingly, the state of Kansas, each department within the state has a separate forest. So Department of Motor Vehicles has their own forest, Department of Revenue has their own. They want to be isolated. But given the scenario of what they wanted to use with Cisco voicemail, they wanted to do that across the entire state. So instantly, what do? Well, Cisco, unfortunately, does not support multiple forests. It only knows how to talk to one Active Directory forest. So take Cisco, connect that to VIS, where we're looking and acting exactly like an Active Directory. It thinks it's talking to one Active Directory. In reality, it's talking to VIS, which is connected up to all the different forests that they have. So very common scenario. You have an application that can't support multiple forests. Hook it up to VIS, the virtual directory, and you're off and running. So our product is called Virtual Identity Server, or VIS for short. And give you another scenario. So Office 365. So Office 365 has challenges in that regard as well. They've added some things on the sync side for syncing the identities out to Office 365. But from an authorization perspective, hook our VIS product up with our federation solution, and now you instantly can have multiple forests for Office 365. We actually have several customers. We run some of the largest Office 365 deployments where each of these customers, they typically operate a forest for every country they're in. And these customers are very large multinational customers. So they have hundreds of AD forests, some of them 120, 140, with generally several 100,000 users. So anywhere between 300,000 users and 400,000 users all going to Office 365 across those. An important thing to note as well is we actually can do that and be highly performing without doing any caching. We obviously have caching options, but that's really not needed. It's a very highly performing product. People often ask that from a proxy perspective. The overhead is very, very low. The L in LDAP, of course, is lightweight, so it's a very highly performing product. So another scenario where a virtual directory can be utilized is to protect Active Directory, right? So when you look at like databases, you would never let a developer go directly to a database table. You'd create a stored procedure or a view that the application would connect and the developer would connect to. That allows you to make changes to the tables, and then you would just adjust the view as necessary. Same sort of thing should be done from applications. Really, in reality, this really should have been something that Microsoft offered on top of AD, not connecting apps directly to AD, but had a proxy. So one of the things you can do is you can see here the normal Active Directory view. There's CN, built-in computers configuration. All that's necessary from an an operating system perspective, but applications simply don't need all that data. So applying a filter within VIS, and now you can filter out all that data that applications don't need. A typical application just needs OUs, groups, and users. So that's actually an out-of-the-box feature we have as a built-in filter that you can apply within VIS to simply just show the users and groups. That's typically all an app needs. You can put a different filter if you need to. So this also helps with data leakage prevention. You're only going to publish the data that the applications need, no more. You can also filter out things like service accounts or admin accounts. A lot of times you don't want the applications to be able to see that. You can also increase the performance, reliability, and scalability. Because we're going directly to AD, you can go to specific Active Directory domain controllers as well. So that's helpful. Another scenario where this is typically used is in kind of the at the top bullet where you have an LDAP proxy firewall for cloud-based applications. So take Cisco IronPort, their cloud version. That needs to connect in, and so that's email. That needs to connect in and connect to your Active Directory forest, look up users, authenticate users, as well as look up distribution lists or groups. So again, apply that filter to only show users and groups, but you're also going to limit what that IronPort can see so that it doesn't see all the data. You can also block things like, say it tried to delete or somebody had the account and tries to delete objects. We can block those individual commands and say, no, you're only going to have a read-only view of Active Directory. We're not going to allow updates or deletes. So another key concept when you look at virtual directories is the concept I refer to as data anywhere, which is it doesn't matter where the data is in your enterprise, we have adapters to that. If we happen to hit a data source we don't have, we can build a new adapter. But data can be in AD, OpenLDAP, NetIQ, for example, IBM Directory Server, Apache. We have those connectors out of the box to get to all of those data sources. So it's not just Active Directory. We also have native adapters to SQL, Microsoft SQL Server, Oracle, as well as generic ODBC. So whatever type of data database that you have, we can get that data as well and present it as a part of an LDAP object. You see the screenshot there at the bottom. You can actually see that I'm pulling in Cost Center, and it's actually coming from SQL. So one of the unique capabilities of our product is we can show on an attribute by attribute basis where that data is coming from. What data source did it come from? And this name here where it says AD and SQL, that's what I put for that connector. It could be whatever you want to put as a label within the product. Excuse me. So you could put in a given forest name, the database name that you're connecting to. I just put SQL there. We can do reads and writes. So within our product, you could have the application. So as far as the application is concerned, Cost Center looks like a standard LDAP attribute, right? It says string attribute. And if you wanted to, you can make that read writable, meaning if the app does an LDAP update to the Cost Center attribute, Viz natively knows how to turn around and do a SQL update to that database table. So very cool technology there. We also support, if there happened to be a multi-row value in the database, we present that as a multi-valued attribute within LDAP. So out-of-the-box features for that. What this also allows you to do, if you didn't have a virtual directory, what a lot of enterprises do is, if it's really important for the application to have it, they'll extend the Active Directory schema. Of course, they went through the schema change control board to actually get that schema extension approved. So typically you don't want to do that, but you would have to extend the schema and synchronize that data in out of the SQL database into Active Directory. This completely eliminates the need to synchronize the data. We will retrieve that data in real time. So we'll do a real-time lookup to that SQL database. Another thing, just to know technically, we can connect to a database table, stored procedure, or view. Go back to that other scenario. I'd recommend a view or a stored procedure rather than going directly to the database table. So one of the other key features, we're just going to kind of cover, I mentioned before, application problems. So some common application issues that arise. One, the product, like the Cisco product I mentioned, not multi-forest or multi-directory aware. Some applications, they expect all the users to be in a given OU, like one OU. Most go down and do a subtree search. Some applications don't know how to do a subtree. So one of the things we can do is take a nested hierarchical structure that you might have in your AD and present all the users to appear to be in one OU, making that application simply function where it couldn't function before. Some applications don't support paging. So we can take an app that connects to us, doesn't do paging, and actually do paging on the back end for it to function properly. Same with the multi-valued attributes. So you can actually do paged requests to multi-valued attributes as well, and some applications don't know how to do that. You could do the different paging settings as well across the different applications so that you can have each application have its own settings for that. And then, of course, since we're connecting up across all the Active Directories, we can create, and Viz does this natively, an aggregate schema across all of those directories. So if there's been some schema changes in Forest 2 and 3, those would appear available to all of the applications. Another couple of just common scenarios that come up, blocking anonymous searches to directories that allow it. Then on the other hand, enabling the anonymous searches for that. You could also aggregate, of course, multiple AD partitions into a single partition. So that, again, some applications can't deal with, a sales.optimal IDM or an engineering.optimal IDM. So we can actually merge that into a single AD partition. Exclude certain search spaces. So I mentioned filter out the data so that applications only have access to what they should have. There may be certain search spaces or OUs that you don't want applications to be able to see. Point and click, you can go into our product and say, just don't allow that given OU to be surfaced. Creating computed attributes on the fly. So for example, maybe you do this based on a Florida manager. So if your location is Florida and your title's manager, we can create a new attribute called role type. So Florida manager. So pretty cool technology. And if that changes, the data changes, the computed attribute will change because it is computed. And then lastly, on this one, we have present an app by app view based on the application or security groups. So without seeing the configurations here, the two connections you see, the virtual identity server at the top where it shows 6 OUs under it, and then the bottom one with Joe Cool with 2 users, that's actually connecting to the same exact virtual directory. But within security groups within our product, we're surfacing a different view. So in the top connection, I'm connecting with a person that's in an admin group, and they have access to all the given backend systems, all the OUs. So I'm actually connecting up to, in this scenario, an Active Directory. This is OU external users is actually an ADLDS instance. OU Gov is kind of a different container within AD, and then this is my SQL connection. So I had a multi-role SQL and a SQL container. The bottom connection is a user that's in an external users group, and thus they only see external users and the SQL node. They don't have access to the other OUs. And so that's done either by security groups, or we can also do that based on IP address, so the IP address of the incoming application. So very, very configurable in terms of how you slice and dice the data. And that's where I say you can really, while it's a security group, you may want to do this based on application. So application A sees this backend data, application B sees this other set of data. So you can very much customize that to your need. One thing that people might not recognize, even if they're kind of familiar with virtual directories, is it can help provide the principle of least privilege by, again, only giving applications the data they need. So that's an important thing from an audit perspective. Secure those back-end systems on an attribute-by-attribute basis. So you can literally get that granular down to an attribute-by-attribute basis. You can also eliminate third-party schema extensions. So beyond the scenario where we're pulling data from a SQL database, right, cost center, not having to extend the schema for that, we also support being able to apply schema extensions directly against VIS. So if you have an application that you would normally install against AD and it would make schema extensions to AD, if those same schema extensions, meaning the installation of the application does those, that can be pointed directly against Viz, and we will virtually apply the schema within a local ADLDS instance that VIS has. So definitely helpful. And again, this isn't for something like Exchange where it's used by everybody within the company, but if we're talking about a subset, an application that's for a subset of users, maybe just the accounting department, you don't want to go extend the schema of Active Directory for everybody just for one department. So that's a very helpful thing for third-party schema extensions. A lot of times that just simply gets denied from being allowed to be in the enterprise. So then some of the other scenarios that you can do, and we've done for customers, is things like returning on a return of a search, encrypting certain attributes, or maybe formatting a phone number differently based on the application IP address. So very cool technology that you can do here, and I've got an example just to kind of show here of what we can do. So while a lot of those things like the drop-down filters that I mentioned are kind of out-of-the-box features, we also created extensibility for ourselves and for you. So our excuse me, our product's written in .NET. So everything that we do within extensibility is done in .NET as well. So you can do that in VB or C# or C. And this is showing you here where I've done a preprocessor on the search LDAP operation. So we have created pre and post processing for every LDAP operation there is, including extended operations, deletes. So one of the scenarios that I typically demonstrate when I'm doing a demo is this pre of a search, where the Cisco Ironport app that I mentioned before, where I said it has to authenticate users, it also has to look up groups, distribution lists. Well, one of the features of the product is it sends out spam notifications to a distribution list if it thinks that the email being sent is spam. The challenge, I'd say, for at least one of our customers is it sends it to the entire member of distribution list. They had about 30,000 people that were in the distribution list. They did not want the spam notification going to everybody. So with the simple little plugin, we created a pre-search. So the LDAP search operation comes in from Cisco Ironport. It actually sees that this is enabled, meaning this sees this. It jumps out into my search code, and I write a little bit of VB code to actually interrogate the search. So within our APIs, you have everything about the search, of course, for the other operations as well. But you have the IP address that's bound, the filter that's coming in, what type of filter it is, subtree as well. So what you can do, and what we did for this customer was, we simply interrogated the LDAP filter, and when the application asked for the member of attribute, we changed the filter. We actually altered it to say, no, go to the owner. So now only the admins of the distribution list got it. So like 5 admins now get the spam notification. So we actually altered the application connecting to Viz without access to the source code of the application. So that's just one example. I'll actually have a couple more examples of what you can do with pre and post processing. The example on the prior slide about doing encrypting attributes or formatting it differently, that would be post of a search, right? So we search on the back end, we get the attribute, but before sending the data back to the application, you can actually loop through the data set programmatically, and you can encrypt the data or format it differently. So very powerful what you can do. A lot of times people ask, well, does this really require statement of work? Not really, not most of the time. Most of those we ship with an entire set of sample applications, so you can develop it yourself, or our folks can do it for you. Typically, these are very short, couple lines of code, and we just actually do that as a part of the support process. So now what we're going to do is talk about additional capabilities that our product brings to the table. The first one we're going to talk about is dynamic groups. Very powerful feature as well. So if you see here, I'm a member, and actually our LDAP manager shows kind of this D as well as that's an A. And it shows that you're a member of a dynamic group for the D. So I'm actually a member of this DG-sales, which is a dynamic group sales. And how I got into that dynamic group is based on me creating a dynamic group that's where the department attribute is equal to sales. So in my demonstration, when I normally do this, I change it around and I change the department attribute on myself to be marketing. And not surprisingly, when I make that update, I'm instantly moved out of the dynamic group sales and into the dynamic group marketing. So where that can be helpful, for the application perspective, as far as the app knows, that's just a normal member of attribute, right? So member of is a computed attribute in AD. Well, it's also computed by our product, and we actually dynamically build that. So from an application perspective, it sees this group. That the advantage, the huge advantage for you as a customer is you don't have to manage this group, right? As my department attribute changed, my group membership changes automatically. No group to manage. It's self-managing based on the data values themselves. Now, I did a very simple one there in terms of just Department of Sales. By no means is that all you can do. You can do multiple attributes. You can do ands and ors. So it can be pretty complex if you need it to be. But that's a very easy example of using a dynamic group. This can also be used within federation. So that can be sent as a role claim to a federated application. And we actually do that, and we won Best of Tech Ed back when Microsoft had Tech Ed for our SharePoint integration. And we actually controlled access to document libraries within SharePoint based on this dynamic role changing and being sent as a role claim to SharePoint. So very powerful, but that can be any application that you need to send that to. It can be sent as a role claim. So now we're going to look at auto groups. So I actually have 2 auto groups here specifies, and you can see that the main one I'll focus here on this active AG-AD. So why I'm a member of that auto group is actually not based on a filter, but based on which data source did I come out of. And you can see all these attributes say AD. So any of the users that came out of this AD are going to be a member of this auto group. So where this really came from, the feature, and we get this all the time, which is our customers will come to us with a request, and typically it's not followed up, or followed up rather pretty quickly by a couple other customers. And that's when we know, we kind of call it the rule of 3. If you get 3 different customers asking for something, you likely have something that you really probably should add to the product. And so where this auto group came from the multi-forest customers, and typically the ones that had hundreds of AD forests. So that group membership can be and can span across each of those forests. So again, it's dynamic, just like the dynamic group, but based on which forest you came out of. So bring a real world scenario. So maybe I'm coming from the Germany forest, and therefore I should have access to a document library in SharePoint that's meant for folks from Germany. Regardless of how that user gets created in the Germany forest, the minute they get created, they're in the auto group. Obviously, if they're deleted, they're removed as well. So pretty powerful. So it's similar to dynamic groups, but really based on which forest you came out of. And then the last group that our product brings to the table is static groups. So what this is really group membership across disparate sources. So one thing this could allow you to do is create group membership across AD forests that don't have a trust. So we've got the independent connections to each of those forests. You could actually have group membership across forests or across different data sources. So my example here is I have a SQL and AD user. So the users that I had up in the SQL database looking like LDAP objects are in the group with AD users. But one we more commonly see is really several of our enterprise customers have a Sun LDAP as their enterprise directory, and then they have AD. So we actually create memberships across a Sun LDAP as well as an Active Directory forest. So definitely some usage there. The Viz static group is actually stored in the local ADLDS instance that we typically have. You don't have to have the local ADLDS, but you need it for features like the virtual static groups and the dynamic groups. If you just want the LDAP proxy firewall, you don't need to install the local ADLDS. So similar to like I was talking about the Sun and AD, we've also done for customers an aggregate member of both Sun and AD, meaning on the member of attribute of a user, show all the groups that the user is a member of from both Sun and AD, and natively show that as a member of. So pretty powerful to do that as well. One, if you're not surprised by this, but a major just feature, I'd say, of virtual directories in general is mergers and acquisitions. So we see a lot of those in the press, and those are easily solved. And we actually had one customer that was already using our product merged with another company, and when the two IT groups kind of met, the first company told the second one, well, look, we've got this virtual directory technology. Look at how easy it is. They had multiple forests already. So for them, doing the M&A was extremely easy. They just added another connection to the other forest. They already had the federation solution. So they were up and running with single sign-on literally within days of the merger actually occurring. And that is something that you'll see the analysts talk to quite a bit. Some companies buy it, especially in industries where M&A happens a lot. Having this in your arsenal is very good. Another major, so we've gone into specific features that we have, but now, like with the M&A, I'm going to cover just a general topic in an area where a virtual directory can make sense. And this specifically is around LDAP migrations. So I want to migrate maybe from a Novell eDirectory, a Sun, IBM to some other directory, right? Might be because of licensing or it's old technology. We did one for one customer where they were on a really old version of Critical Path and they wanted to get off. So VIS can emulate any LDAP directory. So what I mean by emulate is a Sun LDAP and an AD, while they both support LDAP, they're quite a bit different, right? Same with like eDirectory. eDirectory has group of unique names as the attribute rather than group in AD, the group attribute. They also support different LDAP controls. Paging is done differently. Well, if you have an application that's coded to a Sun directory and you try and point that same application over to AD, it's probably not going to work because of all those supported controls. The attributes are all different. The schema is different. So we can actually emulate. And if you look at the low-level DSA, when you connect to us, we'll actually say, and so like in the AD scenario, we'll put out the supported controls. We look and act like an AD. We literally say, hey, I'm AD, essentially, to the app. We can do the same for the other directories. So what we'll kind of walk through is the scenario of how you would go about doing this LDAP migration. So the first thing you do is we stand up that new instance of whatever you want to have as your new directory, AD or ADLDS. We typically use AD/LDS for this, highly performing. It actually performs better than AD because you've removed the networking, but it's essentially AD without all the operating system pieces. So then what you're going to do is VIS is going to handle all that mapping, routing of where the data is. So first thing we recommend is first connect up Viz as a pure proxy, right? So the app was connecting directly to critical path in this example. Now we're going to put Viz in the middle and really first just have it do a straight out proxy. The reason you're going to want to do that is you want to make sure the app still functions, right? So it's kind of your stop measure. Does the app function like it did before? It should, because we're simply proxying the data. Milestone 2, so kind of a scenario that you probably likely want to do is migrate over the passwords, right? Hopefully they're encrypted in your LDAP directory. So you would handle this a little bit differently depending upon the data and how you have it. But the common one that we do is we would then configure a connection to AD/LDS or to AD, and you would do a mapping. And what we would do is configure Viz to do the password routing and setting. And so what I mean by that is we take that pre and post processing we talked about, and the first thing we would do is we create a virtual attribute called, has been migrated. You initially set that to false for everybody. So when Viz does an LDAP bind, pre of the bind, we would actually look up and see if that attribute is set to false. If it is, we would route the authentication to the critical path directory and then save in memory of Viz, encrypted, just in memory, the password. If the bind is successful, then post the bind, we would take the password we have in memory, decrypt it, and set it in the new directory, and then flip that virtual bit to true. So then on the next authentication for that user, Viz would look to the attributes, see that the user has been migrated, it's set to true, and we would do the proxy of the bind directly to AD. So over time, users would be coming in and authenticating. You would be migrating them as they authenticate through the system. Now, if you have a mechanism for getting the passwords out and resetting them into the new directory, you certainly could do that. But we kind of have the flexibility of doing it either way. You can do a big bang if that's an option for you, or you can do it with the plugins, like I mentioned here. So very powerful, and your app functions, right? Because Viz is still going to look like the critical path directory from all the attribute perspective, but in reality, we're going to AD. Now, this is typically true for a couple of reasons. One, you might not have access to the source code, or two, you may be looking at hundreds and hundreds of applications that are going against that old directory, and it's not feasible to migrate them over. So it's a very powerful tool to be able to do this migration. Now, over time, you would decommission the old directory. So let's say you got 90% of the users. You can, of course, write a query or a report to see how many users have been migrated over to the new directory. At some point, either the people that haven't logged in, it depends on the scenario. Maybe they're external users and they're never going to come back. But you could also provide a forgot password functionality for them. But at some point, you're going to decide nobody else is going to come back to the old directory, and so you'll go ahead and decommission the old directory. You could, of course, leave it up and running if you really wanted to forever. Now, reality in this scenario too is you're really going to need Viz. It's not like you can remove us now after you've done the migration, and the reason is, again, all those apps are talking the old directory from a schema and a supported controls perspective. So Viz will always still be there, but now you can get rid of that directory that you didn't want, whether that's licensing or whether that's from a support standpoint. So now we're going to go to some of the other scenarios. So not surprisingly, we kind of showed with the pre and the post processing, everything's going through Viz, right? So lots of data is coming through there. So we do have very complex audit logs. Now, this could be either to a database that's on-prem that you host and manage, but all of the individual operations, so successful authentications, failed authentications, updates. On updates, you get a before and after, meaning what was the data value before the update happened, what was it afterwards. On searches, you get what was executed, the filter, the response time, meaning how long did it take to execute it, what were the filters, what were the attributes. You get a ton of data that is very useful. You could actually do, at like that bottom bullet, a complete application playback to know what the application did over time. You can also use it if you're very wise. I would look to searches that are taking greater than X, knowing which ones are not unindexed or are unindexed searches to be able to index those attributes. So a wealth of data is there. So from our product, you've got the on-prem database that you could host. You also can choose our cloud-based version. So in that case, Viz writes RESTful web service calls out to our cloud, and we host a private database for you. And then you have reports that can be run. That's helpful when you have to, some of our customers said, I have to go over to the SQL DBA group and have them spin up a database. This allows me not to have to do that, and it's out there in the cloud, and I don't have anything to host and manage. Our other option as well is things like Splunk. So you can push the data out to FLAC files and suck that into a system such as Splunk. A lot of our customers do that. So as we kind of wrap things up here a little bit, we do, of course, support high availability and failover. So you can do that within our product. Other common ways people put a standard hardware or software load balancer between us and the backend data sources for the high availability. You'd also want to put Viz behind a load balancer, right, for high availability. You'd want a minimum of 2 servers, and our licensing covers that for you. For the backend systems, you can also go to a VIP to get the high availability, or a DNS name. All of those are kind of standard things. We do have a doc dedicated just around high availability and failover and what your options are. I mentioned that 99% of our customers don't use caching. It's there if you need it. There are certain scenarios. I give an example, repetitive searches. If there's an app that's doing very repetitive searches, you may want to do a search request cache. But again, 99% of our customers don't need to do a cache. And I'd recommend not if you don't need to. But you do have those options as well as like on the joins and object cache. From a platform perspective, I mentioned the product's written in .NET, so we do run exclusively on Windows Server. Even going back, I think we still support 2012, but 2016, 2019, and we have been certified on each of those platforms. We do have a 64-bit version as well. So we do run exclusively on Windows. One of the things, and some of the items I mentioned here are in this, but if you're interested for an interesting read, we do have a white paper of 101 uses of a virtual directory on our website. So feel free to search for that and download the 101 uses. I did that at a conference many years ago. I was up for the challenge of coming up for 101 different uses, of which I did, and I actually threw in a couple extra ones. Please feel free to reach out to me if you'd like a demo. My contact information is here, and I think Matt shared that in the invite as well. And I think he's going to post a recording of this for any of the people that signed up, but then life got in the way and couldn't attend the webinar live. And the last thing I'll leave everybody with, and then I'll have Matt handle any Q&A if anybody has questions. But the next one, next month, we're going to have a webinar on the optimal cloud. So we'll talk about our cloud-based identity and access solution and give you a good background on the optimal cloud. I thank everybody for attending. I'll kind of pass it back to Matt if he's got any questions in